Welcome back to the MovieBabble Podcast. This week it's myself, Colin, and Brennan. We're going to be talking about the Lego Movie 2 and some of the disappointment surrounding its opening weekend. What Men Want, Cold Pursuit, some of the controversy surrounding Liam Neeson, and The Prodigy. We'll also talk about Aquaman and its first week not in the top 5, as well as a few other movies and some Valentine's Day predictions. Feel free to check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com and enjoy this episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. So this is week 2 of the revamped MovieBabble Podcast. Today it's just myself, Colin, and I've got Brennan on as well. Nick is busy doing other things this week, so we're going to dive into the top 5, and I'll list those real quick just for anybody that's curious. So we've got the Lego Movie 2 opening up with $34.4 million, followed by What Men Want at $19 million, Cold Pursuit at $10.8, The Upside at $7.2, and Glass still hanging on at the 5th spot with $6.4. So let's start with the Lego Movie. We talked about this a little bit just before we started the actual podcast, but it has opened quite a bit behind expectations, and I think it 50% of what the original opened up to. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I don't know where they went wrong with this film. Maybe it's just too many Lego movies in the last few years. I'm not 100% sure because it's not like the quality dipped. You still were getting good reactions from Rotten Tomatoes. You're still getting solid word of mouth. But the film just took a complete drop. And I don't know, I don't know if the studio saw this coming. I mean, projections had this thing at 40 million at the lowest. And this thing opens up to 34.4, which, yes, is 50% lower than the grossing opening weekend of the first Lego movie. So that's a disappointment for sure. It's not a bomb by any means. I think we can both agree on that, but it's definitely a disappointment.
Yeah, and I think the studio must have seen something coming, because when they did the pre-release, they had it where it played in a pretty decent amount of theaters across America. For one day only, they had one showing only, and they announced it maybe 3 or 4 days before, because it was a Saturday at 2 o'clock was when they were opening it up, and I don't think they announced it until Wednesday or Thursday. And so I was really worried that it was just going to be a terrible movie, because it was still when their review embargo was still in place. So it's like, okay, maybe they're hoping that people won't have any kind of preconceived notions, and then they'll go in. And honestly, I think they must have known something and were hoping that maybe word of mouth would spread from that.
Right.
Because this is, I mean, it'd be understandable if it was, just a little bit below the first one, or even more in the range of Lego Batman. But to be kind of this far is honestly a little bit shocking.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it sucks. And I'm not going to fault the film. I'll definitely still urge people to see it. I saw it myself. It's an enjoyable time. I don't think it's as good as the first one. I think you can agree with that. But it's still a good movie, and I think these Lego movies, they don't have the magic they first did. They're not as surprising, in my opinion, as they were with the kind of the shock value of first seeing Lego come to life on the big screen. But they are still enjoyable and worthy animated films. So I definitely would urge people to check this one out. But just that much of a dip. I mean, we'll see if this thing has legs. It's not for a couple weeks until How to Train Your Dragon 3 comes out domestically, so they might have a little bit of a gap there to make some money, but it definitely hurts this opening weekend for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have the market on kids' movies and animated movies for a little while. They're far enough away from Spider-Verse now that I don't really think that would play too much into the dip.
Yeah,
and then again, hopefully word of mouth can build and it'll pick up steam and hopefully, make back most of what is missing right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree too. It's a perfectly good movie. It's entertaining, funny. It's got heart to it. And I mean, it's not as lovable or charming as the first one, but it's still a really good movie and a worthy successor to it.
Definitely.
Coming in at number 2 is What Men Want with 19 million.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid opening for this film. The projections had this thing kind of in the low 20s, so still based off projections a little bit lower than what was projected, but 19 million for a film like this. It's a $20 million budget. It's a comedy. It's February. It's not too bad. Taraji P Henson, I mean, she has a little bit of a draw now. It seems like uh, she's okay at getting people out to the theater. But as we talked about before the show, there were definitely some diverse options of films this weekend, but they all just seem to not quite hit the mark. And this, I guess you could argue, is another one, but it's still a respectable opening.
Yeah, and this one, I, I'm surprised that it actually made 19 million, but I'm also not surprised because they've been marketing this one for months.
You're right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I've been to so many movies where this was a trailer in the
Yeah. Me too.
past 3 or
Yeah.
4 months, and so I know they were definitely hitting it pretty hard. And what I didn't realize is this is actually a remake of a Mel Gibson movie from
Yeah.
I think the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. That's right. Um, yeah. I've never seen the Mel Gibson one. You haven't either?
No, I haven't.
No. I mean, I heard it wasn't very good. Same as this one. I've heard not great things about this one either.
Yeah.
But it still looks like it's gonna make its money. Like it still looks like it's gonna be okay with a $19 million opening on a $20 million budget, right? So I mean, that's not too bad for Paramount. I think they can definitely be happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we really have anything that bombs this weekend other than maybe The Prodigy.
Right.
Um, well, Prodigy, their budget's low enough that it'll probably do fine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we really have anything that bombs. We just have a lot that is kind of adequately making money.
Right.
Nothing that's a huge win, but enough that no production company is going to be upset that they made it.
Yeah. That can take us into the next one for sure. So Cold Pursuit, the new Liam Neeson thriller, debuted in third position this weekend with $10.8 million. Um, that's an okay opening. I mean, I was kind of eyeing this film because it's coming out kind of at the same time as The Commuter did last year. The Commuter made 13 in its first weekend, I believe. 10.8 for this one. I'd say again slightly under expectations of about 12 to 13, but as you said, an adequate enough amount of money, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I don't want to get too much into the controversy of the week with Liam Neeson, but do you think that at all played a part in the numbers at the box office, or do you think people didn't really care?
See, I'm curious because it cut him off from a lot of his last minute promotion for the movie.
Yeah.
So he was pulled from the late night schedules. Um, I mean, obviously his name was just kind of being raked through the coals.
Yeah.
And so I have to imagine that plays at least a part of it, but I also don't think that the hype or the audience expectations for this movie were that high to begin with either. And
No,
so
for sure.
had that controversy not taken place, I don't know if we'd be seeing it, at a higher spot or even performing much better than it is now.
Yeah. I mean, it just, the trailers all play like just your average Neeson action movie, right? Um,
Yeah.
I haven't got to see it yet. The only one I did see this weekend was Lego Movie 2, but I am probably going to be seeing Cold Pursuit soon. Uh, but I'm hearing that it's a different movie than you'd expect. Have you heard anything on the movie?
Yeah, I've heard kind of the same thing. When I saw the poster for it, it looks just I don't know if
Yeah.
you've seen the poster, but it's the car that's jammed through the top of
D-
a tree.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that.
And so I saw that. That was my first exposure to it, and I was like, I don't know. I feel like they're jumping the shark a little bit here.
Yeah.
But yeah, from the reviews I've heard, it's got some pretty decent twists. I mean, it does hit your typical Liam Neeson Taken beats,
Right.
but it adds enough to the mix that it's really something that is worth watching from what I've heard.
Yeah. And I'll definitely put my thoughts out there when I do get to see it. But I mean, 10.8 million in the first weekend. It's a respectable start for sure. Number 4 this weekend we can move into now. The Upside overtakes Glass this weekend. $7.2 million. This film has legs, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's still going pretty strong, and I mean it's more than doubled its budget, and I think this helps push it past that and probably cover a lot of the marketing they did for the movie as well. So
Yeah.
I would imagine STX is pretty pleased with it, and it'll be good. It's a good crowd builder for Kevin Hart and Bryan Cranston, just to remind people that they're out there still doing stuff.
Yeah, and it just took a 17% dip from this weekend from last. That is pretty remarkable when you think about it. It's up to 85 million domestically. I mean, this movie's never had a drop over 30%. I think that's pretty impressive. And to overtake Glass even, and it's been out longer than Glass by a week, to overtake it now, that's pretty good. And I think that this film might actually be able to potentially stick in the top 5 next weekend. I think it might be close, but I think they might hold on to the 5th spot next weekend. We have next weekend Alita, I believe, coming out. We have Happy Death Day to You, so I mean that might be enough to knock it off. But the film's still going to be making its money, right? I mean, it has legs, and it's proven that time and time again.
Yeah, and it fits this category where there aren't really any movies like it coming out anytime soon.
Right,
And
exactly.
so same thing with the Lego movie is it's got a little bit of wiggle room to keep just pulling in a smaller crowd and keep going a little bit each week.
100%. Yeah. 5th spot this weekend, Glass. So after 3 consecutive weeks at the top spot, it drops to 5th. That's what happens when you have several new films hit theaters. So 6.4 million for Glass. It only took a 33% drop from this weekend to last, so I think the studio can be happy about that. What do you say?
Yeah, I'd agree. And I mean, Glass is another one that we talked about it a little bit last week, but it wasn't really known where to place it because Unbreakable had been a pretty decent hit, Split had been a pretty decent hit, and Shyamalan doesn't always have the best track record, so it was a little bit up in the air, and it's more than made back its money.
Yeah, for sure. We also had another new movie come out this weekend, the new horror film, The Prodigy. That thing debuts at $6 million, which I would say they definitely probably wanted more, but on a $6 million budget, you've made it back in the first weekend, so I think you can be, as you said, adequately happy.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue with this movie is going to be that Happy Death Day to You opens up next week.
Yeah.
And so it's really going to have to fight for continued success at the box office.
Yeah.
And starting off, with just barely eclipsing the budget, I think this movie is going to struggle to make a genuine profit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they'll make back what they spent with the budget as seen this weekend, and then marketing might be the next step, and then making a profit. You're right. It might be definitely difficult with Happy Death Day to You next weekend. That definitely will pose a threat for The Prodigy. I think that this film definitely wanted more as one of those February horror films, but I think that all the ads lately are really Happy Death Day to You. They're really promoting that film hard. So it probably eclipsed The Prodigy just a little bit.
Yeah, I think next week it'll be an interesting week next week. Not wanting to fully move into that yet, but because you'll still have at least the Lego movie and What Men Want will probably still be fighting pretty strong. And then you also have, Alita, which has been advertised for forever. It's been pushed back at least once, I think maybe twice. And then you have Isn't It Romantic? You also have Happy Death Day to You opening up. So next week will be quite a fight. But another interesting thing this week is that it's also Aquaman's first week, not in the top 5.
Yep.
So this is week 8, and Aquaman has finally been dethroned. I've still pulled in a respectable 3.3 million, and it's
Yeah.
still holding a top 10 spot. But
Yeah.
it's I think the terrible pun, but I think the tide is coming down.
Yeah, I think I can definitely agree with that, especially with Alita coming out next weekend. It's another kind of sci-fi film that will probably take some of those fans away. Um, but yeah, I mean, definitely a good run for Aquaman. $328 million domestically now, and I believe it just opened up in Japan this weekend and made a decent sum. So it's definitely right on track for 1.2 billion worldwide by the time it's done. So Aquaman definitely it's definitely made its money, and it's definitely one of the biggest stories of last year for sure.
Yeah, Aquaman has surpassed all expectations a couple
Yeah.
times over.
Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of the theaters drop too. I mean, you see Aquaman this past weekend, 724 less theaters than the weekend before. So next weekend we might see it drop under 2,000, and then just continue to lose its box office steam. Also, Miss Bala from last weekend, that's one that we talked about. That film completely drops off to 10th spot this weekend. I believe it was third last weekend in its debut weekend, and it just completely drops to 10th this weekend. 60% drop. So, I mean, that's what happens. That's what happens to some of these movies, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing similar results with The Kid Who Would Be King. It's only
Yeah,
in its third week, but it's already dropped off to 14
yeah.
in 1.5 million. This is definitely a disappointment for Fox.
100%. I mean, the budget for this film, it's quite hefty as well for The Kid Who Would Be King. Um, they put in some money. They do use a good amount of VFX in this movie. So they definitely wanted more. And I'm hearing it's really just a mismarketing, a misfire on the marketing half of things. They're only up to 15.7 million domestically, which is a pretty rough sum, all things considered. So yeah, Fox is definitely pretty upset with this one.
Yeah, and I think it's just a reflection of the medieval tales and the Arthurian legends really haven't managed to hit in a while.
No,
I
you're
mean,
right.
there used to be a time when King Arthur and Robin Hood could sell any movie, and then,
Yeah,
everybody made 70 versions of them.
exactly.
And I think Hollywood hasn't fully caught on with that yet. You see the same thing with Robin Hood this
A
past
few,
November.
a few months ago,
Uh,
that was a bomb.
yeah, there was the Robin Hood with Russell Crowe in, I think, 2010
Yeah,
was kind of the same thing, barely made money, but was recognized enough that obviously they thought they could do it again this past November. And there was Transformers: The Last Night was also very Arthurian centric, and that was the worst performing one. There
yeah.
was King Arthur: Legends of the Sword that also failed. So I think there's just a big disconnect between modern moviegoers and King Arthur stories.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that the studios have got to move on from. Yeah, especially because the budget for these movies, they're usually not small. They're usually pretty hefty budgets because all the sets and special effects that go into films like that, they're pretty significant. So the studios definitely have to be a lot smarter when they make films like these.
Yeah, I think if you went and really scaled it back and kind of got to the roots of what made, King Arthur and Robin Hood and Zorro really successful back in the day, is you just have to really strip it back to the essentials. You can do a Arthurian tale pretty practically and in a much smaller budget
Yep.
if you have a good story behind it. And I think that's really what people want, not so much as, oh, well, this has King Arthur in it or this has Robin Hood, because, well, those characters are iconic. It's not really because of an actor anymore. Because, I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's played Robin Hood at this point. Everybody's played some version of King Arthur. And so you really have to find a story that people can connect to and something that they, haven't been bombarded with already.
Yep. Oh yeah. Definitely agree. Um, Yeah, I mean, overall for the weekend though, we have, as you said, adequate money being made, but overall slightly disappointing for some of these films. Also, some of the Oscar movies that are kind of getting these extended runs at the box office just because of all the nominations and award talks they've been getting. They all have decent weekends, but their theater counts are starting to drop. When you look at Vice, when you look at Green Book, um, all these theater counts are starting to drop for these movies. So we might start seeing them kind of teeter off until maybe Oscar night, and one of them gets a bunch of awards, and they might have another little boost or something. But all these Oscar type films are starting to drop off as well.
Yeah, I think we'll see a little bit of a bump here in about 3 weeks, just the weekend before, because everybody brings them back and
Yeah,
runs little marathons and whatnot. And then the winners will see a little bit of a bump, especially in their DVD and Blu-ray sales, and then
for
most
sure.
of them drop off the face of the earth,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. Um, so about next weekend, let's move into some next weekend talk. I'm gonna try to get a top three prediction out of you, if you don't mind, by the end of this.
No, you're good.
Um, so next weekend, I'm pretty excited for Alita, the Battle Angel. It's actually, I don't know about you, but it's in my top 10 most anticipated films of the year. I like the people making this movie. I've been discouraged by some of the reviews, but that never stops me. I always go and see a movie, and I'm always objective with it. Um, but I'm just very hyped for this movie because I'm hearing some great things about the experience, about the 3D, which 3D, it's not something I'm a huge fan of. I don't always see movies in 3D. Last year, I think I just saw one in 3D. But
Mhm.
this is probably going to be the one I see in 3D this year because, I mean, they're using some pretty good technology, and I've been excited for this movie. I enjoy the trailers, so I'm rooting for it. But I think it has all the makings for a box office bomb.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that they've been the trailer for this movie is pretty close to a year old.
Yep,
And with all the shuffling with Disney buying Fox, this has traded places with the X-Men Dark Phoenix a couple times, and then that ended up getting pushed back. This got pushed back. This got moved forward a little bit, and then New Mutants. There was no one really knows what's going on with that movie right now, and Alita has kind of been caught in the shuffle of all that. And
yep,
yeah, the early reviews have been iffy at best, although as since the review embargo lifted a few weeks ago, I've seen the reviews getting a little bit better. So the first impressions were pretty bad, but as more people are starting to see it, I've heard better things about it. So I'm trying to keep an open mind, and hopefully they can really hit on the visual side and really deliver a spectacle in that sense.
yeah. I hope they make back enough money because I mean, you look at this thing; it's about a $200 million budget. That's quite the budget. So they definitely are going to need to be really really cashing the checks. They definitely need to be getting a lot of people out to the theater. I think this could be one of those films that bombs domestically but has a pretty good global draw. I think this could be a movie that does well in foreign markets, um, but might struggle here in North America. But I'm definitely hoping that word of mouth is positive. I'm hoping that people give this film a try because I think it's going to be one of those movies that it's truly more of an experience to watch and a visual spectacle, as you said. So I'm definitely hoping people check it out. I'm probably going to be seeing it Wednesday. It's playing here at my local theater Wednesday. Um, but yeah, I'm rooting for it, but I don't know if it's gonna if it's gonna be enough. I think this film definitely could be one of the first big box office bombs of the year.
Yeah, I agree. I think this could easily become, we had Mortal Engines a little
Yeah,
over 2 months ago, and that
yeah,
was a just a huge bomb. And
yeah,
I fear that Alita could kind of fall into the same trap there,
yeah, for sure.
especially in a very heavily competitive week with the Lego Movie is still going to be pretty fresh. Cold Pursuit, What Men Want, and then we've got the other movies opening that week, like Happy Death Day to You, which I actually haven't seen the first one, but the trailers for this one actually have me kind of excited for it. I'm actually
Yeah,
pretty intrigued by what's going on.
and the first film, I mean, of course, it's a premise that is overused, and it's a premise that Um, it might feel pretty old by now, but this is a premise that still gets people excited nonetheless. Kind of the Groundhog Day premise of just the days continuing, right? Um,
Mhm.
I think it's something that can be applied to many different genres. So people are still going to be excited for this movie. I mean, the first one had a $26 million opening weekend. That's pretty good. So I would expect the sequel to still be pretty good. I think the sequel definitely has a shot at $20 million plus,
Yeah, I
at
think so too.
least. Yeah, I think it's going to be probably the horror film of February. I mean, we see The Prodigy lax. I think a lot of those horror fans are probably going to be coming out next weekend to see Happy Death Day to You.
Yeah, I agree. And then it's a pretty broad weekend, just like this one. We have Isn't It Romantic coming out,
Yeah,
which uh, I feel like that one could go either way. I think it'll probably end up with a cool 15 to 20 million. I don't
yeah,
think it'll just be a huge hit, but I think it has enough appeal. Rebel Wilson is pretty recognizable,
yeah,
and the concept itself is a little cliched, but it's not completely overused. And I think the addition of Liam Hemsworth is going to add a lot to it as well. So I feel like Isn't It Romantic will fare decently next weekend.
yeah, for sure. And I definitely think that, especially obviously with the Valentine's Day date nights and such, you're definitely going to see some boosts for that film as well. And definitely even Happy Death Day to You as well. I think it's a movie that definitely you could definitely see couples going to for their Valentine's Day date nights.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I think that the biggest failure of the weekend that Alita could probably have is coming second. I think that's a real possibility because I think Happy Death Day to You, it's just it looks like a film that people see the trailer. It just looks like a lot of fun for a lot of people. It's not a film that is just for a certain type of movie lover. Like it's not just a sci-fi lover's film, not just an action lover's film. This is a movie that it looks just like an enjoyable time. I mean, if you despise horror films, you think they're a little bit silly, then maybe you won't like the premise of this movie. But for the most part, I mean, the first one was successful, $26 million opening weekend. If this one even replicates that, Alita might. It might be a real fight for first place.
Yeah, and I'm afraid that Fighting with My Family is another opener next week. And I've heard nothing but positive reviews of it, but I'm afraid that it's just such a niche story
Right.
that it's not going to have a lot of mass appeal. And I think it's going to be one of the larger victims of next weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely see. I can definitely agree with that 100%. Um, but you do have the Dwayne Johnson cameo, so that might help out a little bit.
Yeah.
For movies from this weekend, I think Lego Movie 2 definitely has, as you said, some wiggle room for next weekend to kind of make a little bit of cash. I think we'll probably see Cold Pursuit die off next weekend.
I would agree.
Um, and What Men Want, I think they can. That's a film that might be able to make a little bit of cash next weekend.
Yeah, I certainly don't think anything that opened this weekend is going to fare just greatly next weekend, but I think everything will hold on pretty well.
Yeah, for sure. You wanna try to configure a little top three, and we'll
Sure.
reconvene next Sunday.
Yeah.
Um, Want to go? I'll go three. You go three. I'll go two. You go two, and then we'll just go back and forth.
Okay.
My number three for next weekend. I'm gonna project right now that I'm gonna go. Isn't it romantic? Nah, you know what? I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Lego Movie 2, and I'm gonna go $16 million for Lego Movie 2 next weekend at number three.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you on that one. I
Yeah,
think Lego Movie 2 is going to hold on enough, and I think it'll probably have about a 50% drop or so.
yep,
So yeah, I'd place it around 16 or 17.
yep. Number two next weekend, I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go Happy Death Day to You. I'm gonna go 20. I'm gonna go $23 million for number two spot next weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little different on that. I think Isn't It Romantic has a good shot at taking the the second spot. I think being opening on Valentine's Day, being a romantic comedy, it's just got date night cliche all over it. And so I think it's going to see a bump from Thursday, especially.
Yep.
And it also does have the extra day opening on Wednesday. I believe Happy Death Day to You does as well. So that gives it an extra day before Alita. And so I think it's going to open somewhere around 20 million.
Okay, I'm going to go the winner of the weekend. So I got Happy Death Day to You at number 2. I'm going to go Alita number 1 with $27 million next weekend. I think Alita the Battle Angel, I think there are going to be some fans coming out, just enough fans to come out and get this film to open up at the number 1 spot next weekend.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to put Happy Death Day to You there. I think it
Okay.
has enough steam from the original, and the trailers have been really good so far. It seems like it's diversifying the story a little bit, doing something fresh, which is very much needed in horror. And honestly, I think it's going to open probably around 25 or so. I mean, maybe on the high end 30. I don't think that's very likely, but I'd say 25 is a pretty good estimate there.
So you definitely think Alita's going to bomb next weekend?
Yeah, I just don't have high hopes for its performance. I mean, whether or not it's, the best movie ever made or the worst movie ever made, I think it's just been shuffled around a lot, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't have high expectations for it.
Yeah, for sure. I just hope it's not as bad as Mortal Engines bombed.
Not.
But I think that's pretty good for the MovieBabble podcast this weekend. I think we covered everything there.
Yeah, so we'll talk to everybody again next week.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. Once again, I'm Colin. My other host was Brennan. You can check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com. And join us next week as we talk about the Valentine's Day weekend, Happy Death Day to You, Fighting with My Family, Alita Battle Angel, and Isn't It Romantic? Again, you can find us online at MovieBabbleReviews.com.